We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Welcome again. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. I am Marlon Detweiler. Today we have some very interesting guests. This will be incredible to talk about, but before I introduce them, let me just mention that one of the benefits of working with Veritas, particularly homeschooling and taking classes with us, is that there's a great deal of flexibility available to families. And today we have Larry and Stacey Fischer with us. They recently had an opportunity, a combination of things that changed their lives pretty dramatically and put them on the road a bit. Larry and Stacey, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you bet. Larry worked for us at Veritas in 2022. And two reasons caused a major change in their life. One was some health issues, but also an opportunity to help run a farm and a business from that farm. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your family. Tell us about you and your children.
Well, we have 5 children, 2 homeschool graduates already, 22 and 20. And then we have 3 younger ones also that are in the Veritas Press program, 12, 9, and 7.
And when you left Veritas, you left in a camper.
Yes, we did.
So it was a major lifestyle change, but the flexibility that we've worked on together and now you enjoy as a family has allowed you to do that. Tell us a little bit about your involvement at Veritas professionally and then personally.
Okay. Well, obviously working as the VP of Sales and Marketing was an incredible experience, and it allowed us to grow and then learn a lot more about Veritas, obviously. But then in 2022, obviously we had this opportunity to come to the farm, but there was actually the house that was here was rented. So we needed to have a place to go until that house was empty, and that house had basically, they said they were going to be out in about a year. So we thought we were going to be going on the road for about a year, but ended up that he left earlier than that, so it wasn't as long as that, but it did give us the opportunity to go traveling. So we bought an Airstream, a 30-foot flying cloud Airstream that will sleep at 8, but we only had, really most of the time we only had 5 of us in it. Occasionally we'd had all 7 of us in there, but so that was fun. We packed everything out. We sold everything at the house, and we moved it all to our daughter's house in Ocala, Florida, and then just got in the camper and went. Actually, I think the first place we went to was New Jersey, the Jersey Shores.
Okay.
So, and then we started traveling. I don't know how much you want to hear about the different places we went, or
I think it would be great because I think it's, and we'll talk, of course, about the fact that you can easily do school on the road. I say easily, that's going to be up to you to agree with. I don't know how easy it's been, but you have been doing it. But tell us where you've been. It was, I think August 31st was your last day at Veritas, and you basically hit the road the next day.
We did.
We did. So the funny thing about realtors is when they want you to sell your house, they want you out of it. And so we actually lived in our Airstream, kind of in our front yard and at a campground nearby our house in the moment we put our house on the market, because they wanted us, to be out. So we lived in a kind of stationary setting, which a lot of people that travel or that do they call it the full-time RV life, a lot of people choose to stay stationary. That was not our choice. I never want to be stationary. So I spent that time mapping out our route. This year, our kids are studying American history with Veritas. Excuse me. And so I looked at what are we studying, who are the authors that we're reading, and where do we want to go? So we went to and there's different elements like geography. So I remember one day we were in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and it was about time for one of our kids to be in geography class. But the thing about the White Mountains is if it's foggy, you can't see anything. And so we had gone up the day before and it was foggy and we couldn't see anything. And it was still an experience, but we couldn't see anything. So the next day we were sitting at a park and getting ready for class. We'd already done one class and we looked up and the mountains had cleared and we could see the top of the mountain. And her class was about to start. And I turned to Larry and I was like, did we skip her class? And he said, let's do geography today. And instead of just being in the geography class. And I was like, okay, that's respectable. Let's do that. So we did that. And the beauty of the live classes is that there's always an archive of the class. Right. And so when we got down from the mountain, she was able to watch the archive. So and we were still able to enjoy it, and then she was able to share that with her classmates. So that was wonderful.
Sometimes connecting using a cell phone will work. Did you try that for connecting to the class?
Oh, there's no internet there. We found that the most difficult places to have coverage was in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, which is, of course, where we started off our journey. But the thing about traveling, too, is libraries are very generous with their internet. And so if you don't have Wi-Fi somewhere, you usually can go to the library. And in that instance, we went to the local library. They didn't open till 10. We had classes at 8, but we went the day before. They said, yeah, you can sit in the parking lot. We parked our camper in the parking lot. And we did school inside the Airstream until the library opened.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
We did do Mick homeschooling is what I call it. We actually went to McDonald's one morning before the library opened and did some Mick homeschooling.
Yeah. So when you're traveling,
McDonald's has internet?
We do.
Oh, wow. There you go. Another option.
It's good. Yeah. Another place that we went was, we're reading this year. The kids read Little Women. So Louisa May Alcott's house is in the Northeast. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's house is, in the Massachusetts area. And then there's Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, whatever you want to call him. And then right now our son is reading The Yearling. And so that book and the author is in Alachua County, Florida, which is where we are right now. So we'll be taking a field trip to there. So it's neat just traveling around and being able to connect it.
Can you go in the Yearling author's house?
Yes, it's she donated it to the state of Florida. So it's actually a park.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What a hands-on experience. How has that impacted your kids and the education they're getting?
I think it's significant. I think the kids being able to see the places that we learn about, I think there's just always something special about that. And them being able to not only recall, okay, I've learned about a moose and where mooses, or whatever the plural of that is, just moose. Where a moose would live.
They're not geese.
Yeah. And then going to Maine and seeing moose on the side of the road, and then, seeing how the people live off of the moose. It's not just a majestic creature that you see, it's also meat. And so we happened upon the weigh-in or the scales where they weigh the moose. And so one day when we were driving by, we just drove by and there was 1,000-pound moose hanging up that someone had hunted, and there was like 4 or 5 of those. It was kind of odd.
Yeah. I think the impact is profound because they now get to put a real experience with where it is and who was from there. I mean, I know that I've heard the kids talking at church to other people about having been to Mount Washington or having, all they're just their adventures and their experiences. So I think it gives a little more rounded, at least I feel like they do get a little more rounded education.
What you are doing is consistent with what we tried to do, as you all know, with the omnibus self-paced courses by filming on site of historic activity, whether it was World War II or the Battle of Marathon. The teachers in those filmed from many of the historic sites and brought great context. And it really does bring a level of reality, but not the level of reality of actually physically being there that your kids have been able to experience. I'm sure this will prove to be really a memory of a lifetime. Many people, as you know, like us, probably like you, travel in the summer to these things, but the ability to schedule your travel, timing it with what they're studying, is just a very unique opportunity that you've seized, and the versatility that we try to offer gives that to people whose work can be that flexible also. So it's been really cool, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about it in the podcast here, to hear more about it. What have been some of the unforeseen challenges? You've mentioned some of them a little bit. I imagine there are some more. I have not traveled in a camper, but I've traveled in an RV, and I can tell you there's some challenges I don't want to face again. I'm curious if you've experienced.
Organization is key. And, when we sold everything, we kept the essentials. And as any bibliophile, I think that's the word I'm looking for, will attest to, trying to pack just the minimum amount of books that you need is a struggle. The great thing about the Airstream is that it's not the largest camper out there by any means, but the amount of storage that it has is pretty remarkable. So we had minimal clothes, very minimalist wardrobe, but we had maximum books.
By far was what outweighed everything else.
You sound like a family with education being very important, and those are the kind of folks, as you know, that we like to hear about. So that's great.
Yeah,
so
Stacey
packing books was a challenge. Timing sounds to me like it was a challenge. We've got to be at a certain place, certain time, have internet access, and that sort of thing. What else has been maybe some of those are foreseen? Did you have any other foreseen challenges that you planned for, and maybe unforeseen ones that you had to adjust for?
Unforeseen would be things like the kids breaking headphones, things like that, or losing the headphones, things like that, or cords, lost power cords and stuff. But Stacey did a great job of organizing, but that was definitely by far the most difficult, because campgrounds get filled up, or the seasons make it where it's difficult to get into certain campgrounds, and so Stacey had to work hard to organize and plan those things. That by far was the most difficult.
How far out did you plan things? Did you have to go out a few months, or were you able to work a week or two at a time?
Well, for the national park system, those get filled up pretty early on, but I usually planned about 2 weeks in advance.
Okay.
And so like when we were at Acadia National Park, we were there for 2 weeks, and we were at one campground for a week. And then and while we were at that one campground, we actually had to move campsites because we couldn't get a contiguous, amount. But those kind of things are not really a huge big deal, and we're flexible, and it didn't bother us. Some people might get hung up on, I don't want to move campsites while I'm there. But sometimes you might not like your neighbors. So
that's one of the beauties of campsites compared to a physical bricks and mortar home. It's hard. You can't pick up and move from a neighbor.
Right. Yeah. And we found there's a lot of great resources out there for families that travel and for just, anybody that travels. And I mean, I don't want to necessarily plug another business, but there's a company where you can go camp at like vineyards and farms
Okay.
and museums, and it's free. They just want you to patronize their business. So we camped at a military museum in Maine, which was
Wow.
amazing. We
Amazing.
stayed overnight. The docent came out, gave us an amazing tour of the facility and the memorabilia from several different wars. And it was just, it's just a really good experience.
That's really
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah, the kids get to hold and actually more tactile instead of most museums just get to look at it. This military museum actually had a 400-year-old pen, and they were able to hold and look at this pen, and then they had cannonballs that were old, and so I got to actually touch and
Yeah.
feel and hear stories directly from a veteran who'd been there during the Vietnam War and
Yeah.
told some stories. He was not terribly graphic. He was pretty sensitive, but it was good. It was really, really good.
One of the other things that we really liked, Marlon, was that our daughter, she does Irish dance. So she was just at the point where she was starting to compete, and they call them feshes. It's an Irish word. And so as a family that could travel, and they have feshes all over the country, we were able to go to several different feshes in different states and have her to be able to participate in her, her hobby of Irish dancing. Even though she wasn't going to her school anymore, the Irish dance school, she was still able to participate in these competitions. And so we traveled and worked our schedules around so that she could be at a competition pretty regularly. And
That's
so
really
that
neat.
was another added thing.
The internet is clearly a mixed bag, but our ability to research and find things and then take advantage of them is really a wonderful tool for the kind of lifestyle that you've been living the last few months, to be able to find those and connect with those people and then do that. I know in our travels, one of the things that Laurie has really enjoyed doing is finding museums with which we could connect our boys' education and things like that. Have those been a significant part of your travels at this point?
I will say that it was surprising that we did not go to as many museums as I thought, because of the ability to visit. Well, I mean, like
Home
authors.
sites are, some of the home sites are
Yeah.
designated in similar fashion.
Right. So home sites, and then mostly outside. So if it was an activity that we could do outside, was really something that we focused on. And, just getting to be a part, every Sunday, even though we were traveling, we were at somebody's church and in their Sunday school class. So being able to really see how other communities across the country really worship, even though maybe it's the same denomination, there's a different worship, there's a different community feel and environment there. So that was unexpected and interesting.
I assume that you were in Presbyterian churches, knowing a little bit about you. Tell us what differences and similarities you observed there. I think that would be very interesting to hear about.
Well, we kind of felt like missionaries some Sundays.
Yeah, there were some interesting experiences for sure.
I'm pretty conservative about what I want for my Sunday school and for my children to learn. And I remember we went to one Sunday school, and I asked the kids how Sunday school was, and she said they played this game with this magic 8-ball. And I thought, well, okay, I don't like that. But also, it was it was a beautiful opportunity to share grace. A lot of, even though it's the same denomination, the gospel of grace was not as predominant in some of them. And so, one time Larry actually brought this woman to tears because he was just preaching the gospel to her. He wasn't preaching, it was in a Sunday school. We were just having a discussion about grace and God's sovereignty. And she had something that clicked in her mind that she had not trusted God with, and recognized that he was sovereign over this particular hardship in her life. And it just clicked with her. And so it was interesting, and we were very thankful for that.
It was a great experience to see how different, people worship, the style of worship as well. Whether it's a small church that doesn't have a lot of music, instruments and that sort of thing, but sings straight out of the hymn book, versus having a full band up there with banjos and that sort of thing. So it's definitely was a diversity in that sense.
How would you say your travel has enhanced your children's education? What will they, and I realize that this is overlapping with things that we've covered, but maybe unpacking even more. How do you expect this will have made their education better? And when I say this, obviously the flexibility to be on the road is a given. So what you've been able to do with that, being on the road, how has that made it better?
Well, I think a lot of when I look at, when you read about families in scripture, there's a discipleship, mentorship aspect to a lot of dynamics there, where the father learns from the son, and the daughters learn from the mothers, and the community there about how
Fathers
to
do
go
learn
about
from
life.
sons, but did you mean sons learn from fathers?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
But fathers learn from sons too. I can speak to that.
Yeah. And just being able to be all together and traveling. And at one point there's this huge it's called the American Quarter Horse Congress, and it's in Ohio. And they have, I don't know, like 1 million people a day.
650,000 people at that show.
Yes, 650,000 people at this horse show.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it is unbelievably massive. And so that was one of our big events to, work in concert with our new business that we had acquired. And so just the kids, I think, being able to see, okay, I'm going to go basically to work with mom and dad and see what this is like, and to be able to learn from that experience. But then I'm also going to be able to go back and do my schoolwork at the end of the day. This is what real life is about. It's about managing your time, managing your aspects, managing what you learn.
Yeah.
And they also have responsibilities in the camper. They have responsibilities when we move. They each have jobs that they do when we move. I can do it all, but I include them so that they have, it makes it faster. It makes it more enjoyable for all of us if we each have a piece of the load. And they understood that, and I think they enjoyed that aspect of travel. They have a job when we stop. Some get out and they do the stabilizers. Some of them have to do the X chocks and all the different things. Hook up the water, hook up the power. So they are all involved.
How would you describe the rhythm of the school day for them?
Not
No rhythm.
Travel days are hard because there's a lot of packing, and there's a lot of getting everything set up. So those days are harder. And I would say it, like when now we're stationary and on the farm right now, and so those days are more predictable and what most might imagine that a homeschool day looks like. So you have more of a routine. But when you're out traveling, your routine is really just accomplishing goals. And whether you accomplish that goal in the morning or in the afternoon or before breakfast or after breakfast, those things are much more fluid.
So there's a sense in which flexibility becomes more important on the road. And you have a list of things that you know you need to do, but when they get done could vary greatly. So the idea of a regular rhythm is part of what you have to be willing to live without. So it sounds like,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's not internet, for example, you're going to have to do it in an archive when we get to internet.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I would assume you're looking for internet and that's the priority, but if you can't, you've got the next best thing. So there's a sense in which the live class time becomes a priority, but it's not an absolute priority because you can't always fit it that way. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and it took us a little bit, but we ordered Starlink, which many people that travel on the road use, but it took some time to get it to us. So Starlink enabled us to then have much more predictable access to the internet while we were traveling.
Very good. Wow. When you settle down in Alachua near Gainesville, well, are you going back on the road again?
We have plans for the summer. We've got a big rally in Wyoming.
Okay.
And of course, I want to go to Alaska because we're going to read some Call of the Wild and whatnot.
With your trailer?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long haul. How many miles would it be to, say, Anchorage from Alachua?
Goodness.
I don't know. I mean, it would take some time.
I don't really know that.
But I've already got arrangements there for us to stay with some friends and park on their property. So,
wow.
Yep.
Well, the experience that your kids are getting, and you know, we always want to say this is what the kids get, but they're experiences that we get too. And to have them together becomes a bond and a connection that is hard to get in many other ways. That's remarkable.
And if you're traveling with part of your children and not all of your children, it's really great at making the older children jealous and want to come back and be with you.
Yeah. I have seen that strategy work too. I still hear about a cruise. We dropped one son off at college and had one other son with us yet. And we headed, after dropping him off, to go on a cruise to Bermuda. And I have never heard the end of it from the son that we dropped off in college. So you leave me behind and you go on a cruise to Bermuda and I'm starting school. So yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, changing the subject completely here at the end, a fun fact that listeners may be interested in knowing. We ran some ads on Fox News not long ago, and one of your children was the star in that ad. Has he ever been identified on the road?
No, but he has told some folks in his classes and stuff.
Yeah, we had a meetup with his class. So even though they're all over the place, one of the teachers was like, "We're going to meet up at this ice cream shop," and we were like, "Okay, well, we'll see you there."
Oh, that's great.
So there were some other of his classmates there, and they were like, "We saw you on the commercial," and so he always gets a little recognition from his classmates. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Well, I'll tell you, you all have really leveraged some of the things that Veritas has tried to make available, and that is flexibility. One of the things that we've really emphasized, as you all know, is to provide means of flexibility for families based on their lifestyle and based on their needs. And you all have really been a wonderful example of taking that flexibility to a level that says, not only can we do lots of different things, but we can do them in lots of different places and still carry on. So thanks for being such a great example of that. Any final words of wisdom to somebody who might consider this?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, well, when you were speaking, I was just thinking sometimes traveling, there can be some tensions.
Yes, there can be.
Yes, there can.
And one might lose their religion. And so I was just thinking it was always nice that the kids were in a Veritas class, because I knew that maybe mom and dad weren't showing the gospel that day and weren't being super glorifying, but they were still going to get that modeled in class.
That's great.
So that was helpful.
Well, it's time. People are as this is viewed, people will be available. It'll be available to register for live online classes, and I hope you, as the listeners, will see what flexibility you can have and join us with that. You've been listening today to Larry and Stacey Fischer, dear friends of Veritas. Folks, thank you for joining us on Veritas Talks, the voice of classical Christian education.